Welcome back. We're examining growing concerns over Yemen's security situation as it deals with Al-Qaeda. They're growing stronger and internal conflicts that threaten the country's stability and integrity. Discussing those with me are Barbara Bodine, the former U.S. ambassador to Yemen, whose experiences have included everything from negotiating hostage releases to being a passenger on a flight from Yemen that was hijacked. And Dr. Christopher Bosek, the Carnegie Endowment's Middle East program, where he focuses on regional security challenges in the Gulf region. Let's get back to some questions, and actually an email question, if I could, Dr. Bosek, for you, from Kili Fahum in Montana, who wrote in saying, how can Yemen engage with tribal leaders to help push some of the AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula members, out of the areas they are training in? What do the tribal leaders need that Sana'a can provide?
I think this is a great question. I think it's one that we probably very poorly understood. I think, the relationship between tribes and the government is something that we need to focus on much more, as, tribes aren't tribes everywhere. And I think there's a fear that, maybe the Americans might have figured it out in Iraq or Afghanistan, but it's not going to work in Yemen.
And I think, Ambassador, isn't one of the key issues that there are so many areas in Yemen where the government really has no say and no hold?
I think that you can overstate that question, that issue. It doesn't have full authority throughout the state, but they're not lawless areas. We described it once as a primordial federalism, where the central government works with the local authorities. What the tribal leaders are looking for from Sana'a is generally a provision of more services. They're looking for roads, they're looking for clinics, they're looking for schools. I was in Yemen when there were a lot of tribal kidnappings going on. And it was always very interesting to explain to Washington that the tribes were actually asking for the government to come into their regions more rather than trying to push the government out. And so this is what they're looking for. And this is, again, this question of legitimacy.
From your experience there, is there enough common ground between those various tribes and this kind of loose federalism, as you say, to find unity in taking action as needed perhaps against Al-Qaeda?
The tribes, again, that's a difficult word to use in an American context because it's so loaded. These are large extended families. They're more horizontal. They're not warlords. There are some tribes that we can work, that the government works with. There are some who, for their own reasons, may be providing safe haven. But it isn't a rigorous hierarchical structure that you can go to the tribes.
We've got a caller on the line from Washington, D.C. here. Amar is on the phone. What would you like to ask, please?
Well, I would like to ask about the military intervention in general in the region. We've heard of many new groups emerge after the so-called war on terror started, and groups that we've never heard of before, a significant number has increased. Isn't it due time to conclude that the military intervention has only made things worse, or maybe change tactics, winning the hearts and minds of people, for example, or...
Dr. Bosek, actually, this is something we've almost touched on, whether or not America is actually fueling its own sort of enemy.
Well, I think there's an immediate counterterrorism objective, the kill or capture of Al-Qaeda leaders and operatives that we know are in the country, that have plotted attacks against American interests and Western interests and regional interests, and now internationally. But that's got to be the small portion of a larger, more coherent counterterrorism strategy that incorporates lots of things, including building capacity and helping to extend legitimacy.
How realistic are the fears that Al-Qaeda in Yemen could start looking at targeting Saudi Arabia now then?
Oh, I think over the past year we've seen there have been a number of incidents. There's an attempt against Prince Mohammed bin Naif's life, which almost was successful. There's a number of opportunities for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula to export suicide bombs and suicide vests that have been intercepted. And this demonstrates that there's a dedicated bomb maker or bomb makers in Yemen, a support system and network for it, and the belief that there's the personnel to use these inside the kingdom.
We've got a caller on the line from Yemen. Kiribel's on the phone. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I want to ask the American, I'm sorry, the American government, why they are not supporting Yemen? Because Yemen is really, when you see other countries, especially the Middle East, Yemen is really open for better than the others, and they are poor, in fact.
Okay.
And why they are not supporting it financially,
Okay.
and they are not supporting new technology things, and then they could fight by themselves.
Okay, good, Kiribal. Actually, that's an interesting question. And actually, I'll put it with a question we got from our live station chat room from Omar in Turkey, who says, if America was serious about helping Yemen, why didn't they take serious action after the USS Cole attack? You were, of course, there as ambassador when the Cole attack, USS Cole attack took place. And what Kiribal is saying is, why not help Yemen find its own feet? You know, give it the right kind of technology, give it the right kind of capacity to deal with these problems.
Well, I think that's exactly what, President Obama has just announced, is that we are going to be working in partnership, was a term that he used, to support Yemen, to help them develop their own capacity. To kind of go back to an earlier question, not to do this with American boots on the ground, but to work with the Yemenis. And I was there during and after the Cole, and a couple of projects that we did begin then, and I think they have already begun to bear fruit, was enhanced intelligence sharing and cooperation, increased training. We did have the attempt in Detroit. We do have a resurgent group, but our ability to cope with it as successfully as I think we will is not because we're starting at a cold start on December 25th, but because we've actually been working on this for over 10 years.
Foundations have been laid.
Yes.
Dr. Bosek, a question that came in actually by email to our Facebook page from Hibist Kasa says, are there considerations to utilize private security companies in Yemen? Under what circumstances will the strategy of employing military tactics become untenable?
I don't think there's a role for private military contractors the way we've seen other places. I mean, I think what you want to do is you want to empower the Yemenis to build capacity to have them do this. I think if we look at how the discussion of the previous attacks on the 17th and the 24th has been framed, it's been all about the United States helping provide technical support to the Yemenis for them doing this themselves. And that's what's going to be important to maintain going forward.
Well, Kellam's on the phone from London. Kellam, go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, my question is why we still talk about one same name, Al-Qaeda, which most people still don't know about, but rather a conspiracy or part of a big conspiracy which acts for the recent government or coming government. I mean, like, whatever is coming next is not better or worse than the local government, because if it's no, like, why don't the local government tackle this problem itself? Because, like, Al-Qaeda, we saw the video, it's just like a bunch of people. The local
So is Al-Qaeda, I mean, I think what Kellam's getting at is that Al-Qaeda as a concept, Dr. Bosek, is perhaps not as, it's an ideology now, and that's the ideology that needs to be tackled.
Oh, definitely. And in addition to this ideology that's probably more widely accepted than people want to believe or accept, we know there is an organized Al-Qaeda presence inside Yemen. I mean, they have said as much, and they have announced their intentions, and they continue to follow through on it. So there's an organization that also needs to be addressed.
So, Master, in all that we've been talking about, the security and the secessionist movement and so on, the rebels, we also have the other things I'd mentioned, for example, the water shortage. You said, no, there's not going to be any more water or oil.
Right.
There's the issue of the population surge as well. Now, what is being done to try to at least enhance, from what you know, enhance the infrastructure of Yemen to try to deal with the change in the way the population will grow, for example?
Well, the issue of the population growth has been very real for quite some time, and the Yemen government has been working on this. Even when I was ambassador, there was a very rigorous or very aggressive child spacing program. The problem that they had was, it turned out, not in convincing people that having 6, 7, 13 children was not a good idea, but then delivering the means. We found that the women were more than open to the idea of contraceptives, but we couldn't get it to them. And so if you're going to do an education, you have to have the supplies behind it. The Yemen government is painfully aware. They've done projections on what their population will be if it's not turned around, and it's truly terrifying.
I'm sure that the way things are going, we're certainly going to be discussing this again. I thank you both for being here for this discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us your feedback on topics and post your questions and comments. On the next show, we look at Iran's ongoing political crisis. Anti-government demonstrations shook the country again just over a week ago, and the protests have continued since the disputed presidential election in June last year. How will Iran deal with its internal turmoil? Make sure you tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.